Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Roswell, New Mexico. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Let's kind of break the episode down bit by bit as it kind of happened. Obviously, you had Kyle and Steph together. They end up going to the restaurant, not knowing that Liz was going to be working there at the time, because obviously, like, her dad's usually there, but he had, somewhere else to be at the time. So it's kind of this awkward thing of like, oh yeah, going to the restaurant where Steph is like, I saw you and her make out. But then like Kyle trying to make things at least a little bit better. It's like, yeah, they dated in high school and everything. And he's also, Liz is also like, oh yeah, and we also found out that we share the same sister. So it's like, and then Steph is like, are you two related? They're like, and Kyle's like, no, I don't. And she's like, and Liz is like, no, don't worry about it. I ran our DNA and stuff like that already. And Kyle was like, wait, you did? She's like, yeah, of course I did. I mean, come on, you know who you're talking to, right? So, and the fact is, you can tell Liz is actually happy for Kyle because she sees how much like fun he's having with Steph and everything. So it's just kind of like this awkward thing that is kind of a little bit of fun between them and everything. What is interesting though is Kyle, dropping the bomb of like, okay, what he found out about Steph is that basically she has like a blood disease. It's like a rare, she has a rare disease. It's like from an infection from like a bacteria or something like that. And so for him, it's a situation of he kind of feels powerless and stuff like that. And for him, he's just like, I don't even know why I love her and like why I even like her. And Liz is kind of like, oh yeah, like she's a strong Latin woman. Like you obviously have a type. But it was interesting because like because she was like, wait, you read her file? Come on, Kyle. He's like, really? You're gonna judge me on the morals of me doing that, miss like having me lie and cheat to everyone? But it's like, oh, at the end of the day, it's okay as long as it's for your boyfriend. She's like, it's okay. She's like, fine, you got me. You guilted me about it, but it's a thing of like you should tell her that because obviously like secrets and all that, which is interesting because she's got her own secrets because she's thinking of using the alien DNA to kind of potentially make a cure-all for humanity. That basically she's surmising that basically because of their DNA and stuff like that, that basically the planet that Isabel, Michael, and Max come from is very similar to Earth. But the fact of the matter is, over generations, they've naturally built up a immunity to a lot of diseases that would exist here on Earth. So it's like she's thinking, if I take their DNA, mix it with human DNA, we could eventually make a cure-all to like every illness. But Kyle's reminding her, like, that's not a good thing to do because of aliens and stuff that gets out there. She's like, I will never expose Max and stuff like that. It's like, at the end of the day, it's not about what you would necessarily do. Even if you don't want to do that, that doesn't mean it won't accidentally happen. You put that in the wrong hands, someone could figure that out. I mean, we already know there's already people out there like Jesse gunning for aliens. So it's like you putting it out there could just give them more ammunition. But for her, it's just like, hearing Charlie talk last episode, I think kind of inspired her to be like, no, I'm gonna go push forward with my work, especially because she wants to do the most. Obviously, she cares about Max. She would never betray him, Isabel, and Michael, kind of put them in a position where they'd be experimented on, because she's like, it would never be like government agents, in hazmat suits coming to take them away and experiment. Or she's like, it would never come down to that. It's like, but that's the thing. You don't know that for sure. You believe that just because you're like, I would never hand that over, but it doesn't mean circumstances won't be created to do that anyway, like that lead to that. But Kyle also brings up another point. You're not only endangering them, it's also you're endangering our sister. Let's not forget how much time she spent in that pod. So she's got alien DNA too. So, and then that's going to raise a whole bunch of questions like, Rosa, she's back from the dead. That's issues upon issues. But, sadly, we see at the end of the day, though, Liz still, like, because she saw, like, the moment she saw Steph drinking from that shake, she was looking at it, and it was like, oh, I was like, where's, and it's like, I thought she was going to say something at a moment, but she didn't. But at the end of the episode, we see her taking that straw, because she's going to, like, if she can take someone's DNA, someone who's sick, and then, experiment with it, then she's thinking, like, maybe, it'll be kind of her first test subject with this whole situation. Because even trying to make Kyle think like, hey, like, because Kyle feels powerless that he can't do anything to actually help her. But it's like, hey, Liz is offering this, but this isn't a viable option in, Kyle's eyes. It was an interesting thing of like, okay, so the terrible things that they've done to people. Obviously for Kyle, he's like, yeah, I was a dick in high school. And the person I treated the worst is actually the person I rely on the most now, that being Alex. And it is interesting how that whole relationship ended up developing into what it is. But the fact is that, Steph had talked about the fact that she basically catfished someone. So that was kind of the worst thing she did. I mean, the argument could be like, I think that could be just, at least for Kyle on a personal level, that probably is. I mean, because everything else he's done, the complicated stuff, sure, it's not necessarily bad, but it's just complicated. Just like I would say the Noah related stuff. I mean, it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just kind of a thing that happened. But, regardless. But he ends up telling Steph about like, oh yeah, I know about your files, which obviously she's like, wait, was that before or after you kissed me? And he was like, that was after. And it's like, it was before I kissed you. And for her, it just like, she's already so used to people treating her a certain way because it's like, oh, you're that sick girl. Like, oh, you're dying. Like people treat her with pity and like a charity case. And, no one wants to spend their entire life being kind of pitied and looked down upon of like, oh, like, let me help you. Like, no, like, because now it makes it seem like every time like Kyle's been nice to her and kissing to her, it's like, oh, you want to just make the dying girl's final days better or something. That's what it looks like. Obviously, that's not the case. I mean, because Kyle really, he does like her and he wishes he could do more than what he's capable of doing. So at the same time this is happening, obviously Isabel and Michael confront Sanders about, everything. And I thought it was so interesting because like Isabel's like, we're going to find out those answers. I thought she was going to start delving into his mind, and she's like, we'll supply you with all the beer. I'm like, oh, that's a very diplomatic way to handle this. I guess it's less intrusive and you're most likely to get all the answers you need by confronting him this way. But we get like his perspective on everything. And even Michael called him out. I was like, how can you remember all that stuff? It's like, oh, you're dramatizing this whole thing. He's like, no, I remember everything. I remember every word just because it was such a good time for him, because he talks about the fact is his mom died when he was young and his dad was abusive. So he ran away. So being on that farm was like the first time he actually had a family, being around Luis, Nora, and Roy. That was the first time he actually had a family and everything. And because it's interesting and he repeats, and like, because obviously this is a line that catches Michael's attention, was the fact is that Nora was kind of explaining to Roy, like, basically because basically Luis wanted to stay for that contest and everything, the contest they would ultimately end up winning. But the fact of the matter is, she wanted, because obviously her and Roy had developed feelings for each other. They were in love, but the fact of the matter is, Nora kind of had to be the party pooper. And like she said, like, we can't stay. We might draw too much attention and stuff. Like going to something so public like that might draw too much attention. But Roy's like, oh, it's been a year. No one's hunting you anymore. But the thing is, like, for Nora, it's like, I have to look out for Luis because Luis is the only one who can look after that child. And the moment she said, I'm like, not children, child. I was like, so even I was immediately like, Max. So this is about that whole savior thing we haven't really circled back to too much, because the only hints we've really gotten about that was from Noah. I mean, that's why Noah wanted to keep them so close, because it's like, it'd be kind of his free ticket off this planet as well, like kind of keeping Max nearby, like kind of basically holding him, like either being like, oh, here's this prize person you're looking after, or here, I've got this prize person you're looking after, let me have my way, and either like let me go or give me a free ride home type of situation. He was going to use it to his own advantage. But obviously he managed to get out, but like because like shots were being fired and everything, we see like I think like shrapnel from like the bullets in the wood, whatever the case may be. That's how he lost his eye. And it's kind of sad. Like he ended up losing it as a kid. He did like while he was escaping, he came across Luis's body, and it's like, so it is cemented that like, oh yeah, like Isabel's mom, was gone. And so obviously, at first, Michael didn't want to hear this because he was like, he'd already heard about the massacre once. He didn't want to hear about it again. But obviously, Isabel needed to hear it because it's like, this is about her mom. So that's kind of all, he was able to really... Because obviously for him, he never wanted to come back to Roswell, but he had to keep a promise. Because he had talked about it earlier, like, he actually he kept a promise to... Nora, because she slipped, was it him or Luis? Probably Nora had slipped him the note before she put him inside the box. The thing is, like, she asked him to basically, it was directions to where their pods were. So from time to time, he'd come in to check on them, but one day he came to check on them, they were gone, and that's when they were wandering out in the desert and ended up getting found, put into child custody service and stuff like that. So for him, he couldn't really do much at that point in time because it's like, hey, you're better off than being taken care of by me, you know? But once again, Michael got so caught up in like the fact is you hear what he said, that child. So once again, Max, the savior. My mom sacrificed her life to make sure that Luis was around, to make sure that it's like for him, it's like everything is all about Max. We're just along for the ride. Like almost like saying, because I think for Michael, it's just like everything's always been about Max. Like Max ends up being the centerfold of our lives here on Earth. And it turns out in a grand scheme of things, he's the centerfold of our lives because he's what's most important. We're just kind of like, because Nora's only there because it seems like Luis was the only one that was Max's guardian. Maybe obviously Nora was just another refugee on the ship and everything. So she had to keep Luis in line to protect the child, but obviously she was mainly there for Michael. But I think maybe she was also there to protect Max as well. But more so, her top priority was protecting her own son. But it was like keeping Luis in line because her top priority was protecting Max. But I think that whole situation is interesting just because it's like, because I was starting to think, I was like, does that mean Max isn't her kid? I was like, no, like him and Isabel are twins. I mean, not unless they think they're. But then I'm like, well, it could just be that Max is chosen, and maybe it's kind of that thing of like either one of them could have been. Like the fact is, we've been seeing Isabel kind of powering up makes me think there might be more to this. Like, you know, it might be all pointed to, I mean, part of me wonders, is it going to be a twist later on where everything's pointing towards Max being the savior? I mean, him being the healer and everything, but maybe there's actually more to it, you know? Maybe it isn't just Max. Maybe it is a combination of like maybe him and Isabel together are. I mean, if they ended up both being the savior type of situation, they both had like half the power or something, that would just probably make Michael feel even worse about it, but still, it's just kind of a thing of like now knowing like your mom died, not just because people hunted her down and everything, that basically in his own way you could point the blame at Max because it's like, because Max is so important, my mom had to sacrifice herself just to make sure he could live, you know? So it's kind of like, that's like the huge downside to it. At the same time, like Alex is talking to his dad, and his dad's, because like even Alex is baffled by the fact is like, here you are running your mouth on and on and on and on again about Uncle Trip. It's like because for Alex, he's like, I've literally never heard you talk about someone with so much love and compassion in your heart. So it's like, he's like, basically never like had any of that towards me. But like, it's like, oh, the reason why I never brought up Trip because men aren't supposed to cry in front of their children, you know, his old blah, 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 chauvinistic, like, ideal of like, oh, what a man is and stuff like that, or you know, his, you know, very, you could arguably, well, not even arguably, just straight up say his like very like bravado like stance on what a man is. Obviously that's just kind of more and more a dig at Alex, but for him he brings up like the time he spent with Trip, like he snuck away from his dad having to lie to him like where he was going, but the moment he got there, like they're talking a little bit, and then his grandfather, you know, Trip's brother, Harlan, showed up and was like, oh, I want to talk to him. Then sometime later, Harlan had told him like, oh yeah, Trip died. That alien, she got inside his head and made him believe that they were, that she was like basically manipulated him and won over his heart. And it's like, and obviously in Jesse's mind, he's like, and they were able to get ultimate revenge against our family and stuff like that. And just like, he just seems like he's such a mess until, well, like I said, everything kind of starts circling around, like, cause we end up finding out, because, Alex talks to Michael about it, and he's like, what if we got the story wrong? Because obviously my dad thought you were just a bad influence, that you were manipulating me, but it was like, no, that's not the case. I knew that you loved me. So what if that's the same thing? Could we get context at the moment when he lowered the gun, that what if him and Nora actually, like, something happened? So basically when he was saying like, oh yeah, 2 days we're going to hit the farm, that he was actually warning Walt. That the fact of the matter is, things didn't go according to plan, because we see in the flashback like his brother like pushed things up of like, oh yeah, like you let that alien get inside your head. He's like, no, I'm gonna be the one to use Dad's gun. And it turns out it wasn't even him that shot Roy, it was actually Harlan that shot Roy. So things like went off like way more than he wanted them to. We saw it time and time again. Even like Harlan pointing a gun, I was like, "Oh, she got inside your head, didn't you?" And he's like, "I'm not under," because he was like pointing a gun at him, because it's like, anyone that's not on their side, on our side, is a traitor type of situation. And you know, he was like, yeah, she got inside my head for a little bit, but he's like, we could take them in alive, we don't need to kill them, we can understand how they do what they do. So he was able to convince his brother. Obviously, some of the other men are beating up on Nora, but luckily, Trip showed up to kind of stop them. He's like, yeah, you can have your fun later. And then Luis was running away, and Nora was kind of happy, and it seemed like she might get away, but then she got shot, and you're like, damn. Like, well, because we already kind of knew it, but I was like, maybe something was a little misled from Walt's point of view or something like that. And maybe it still was, but we'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is that when that's all said and done, though, obviously for Michael, it doesn't matter, like, what, because for him, it's like, there's no one left alive. Everyone was literally dead. Even his mom now is dead. Like, there's no one that left to really 100% know what went down. And obviously, because Alex points on at a certain thing where basically his dad was like, justice comes before disaster strikes. And then, but Uncle Trip's final words to him were, disaster mustn't come until after disaster strikes. So basically, his uncle's perspective was like, people are all about preemptive strikes. He's like, yeah, preemptive strikes, it kind of makes him seem like you're afraid or, fearful. So it's basically strike after something's happened, like only bringing the big guns, go all guns blazing type of situation after disaster struck. In their case, disaster hadn't really struck yet, and they fired the first shot, and that's what he was kind of trying to tell Jesse, not to go down that route. But and obviously, Alex shows up at the restaurant, and he's like, yeah, I'm trying to find something for my Uncle Trip. Like, apparently he had a special booth and everything. They find a missing brick, and we find out, like, there's a picture of Isabella Max's mom. She's in, I'm assuming, like, the bullet didn't kill her. It might have been a situation of it might have paralyzed her. Because, like, when she was looking at Nora like that, like, because I guess she was reading Nora's mind, so she probably has, like, Isabel, like, her and Isabel share the abilities. Because I think, doesn't Michael and Nora share the same abilities? I think. But regardless, the fact of the matter is, I think she had read Nora's mind at that time and knew what Nora really meant about, like, without Nora having to say it, she was able to read her mind and be like, oh, that's what you're talking about, stormed off. But I'm assuming, like, maybe she got paralyzed, but it shows that their mom's been alive this entire time, and that means Trip was on their side the entire time. But at the same time, we hear that, like, Jesse has been listening, because I guess he, like, bugged something of Alex, or maybe he's had Alex's phone bugged the entire time, but then we see him walking without the cane and everything. So it's like everything he's done has been for the purpose of luring Alex into a false sense of security. It's like Alex is looking at, like, yeah, he might hate his dad, but his defenses were up beforehand, because it's like, oh, his dad's strong, but now his dad's weak. He just kind of feels bad for him. So it's like his guard isn't up. So his dad's just been milking and manipulating the situation, because he knew Alex, because he made it seem like, oh, he's just going to watch from the sideline. He's got no more hate and stuff. Like, he's been it's the long game, because even him shaking hands with Max, it's just all. So for him, I'm sure this is all about finishing, like, oh, wait, now he finds out, wait, Uncle Trip was a traitor. Damn him, like, because he cared so much about Trip. Not unless he knew that Trip was a traitor and all this was further set up. I don't know, like, who knows, like, how far this con goes with Jesse of, like, was throwing all this stuff out there about Trip meant to do this? Like, did he know, or is this new information coming to him? And he's like, no, Trip wasn't like that. Trip was all about this and that. That's what I'm curious about. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. The other side of things, interestingly enough, Max wakes up and it's like, oh, Charlie's going. It's like, yo, Sheriff, we gotta. She's like, yeah, you're under arrest. I'm like, what? I was like, is this about the Noah stuff? I was like, I thought Kyle kind of put that to bed. But it turns out she's actually arresting him for all the kidnappings. Because she ends up bringing up some interesting information. Because basically, like, she brings up stuff from Max's files about him and Isabel and Michael. And he's like, no, those were sealed and everything. She's like, I worked the case back then. Because she was like, I wanted to find a piece of crap parents that would do that to you, all three of you, leave you out there alone. And it turns out, she brings up the fact is that a lot of Max's history, like, it's like, hey, you've been traumatized. He's like, me and Isabel were never traumatized. He's like, yeah, maybe one twin wasn't. But she talks about, like, at that home, like, when they were brought into foster care and stuff like that, that Max acted like he was traumatized. Like, he would be screaming, drawing stuff on the wall. And Michael took the crayon and stuff from him. And so what was all blamed on Michael was actually Max, which further kind of makes you go like, oh, Michael kind of got screwed the pooch because he always kind of has to ultimately, sadly, ends up suffering because of Max. It's no wonder they kind of have a very complicated relationship. Like, you can understand a tiny bit where like Michael might have some resentment towards Max. But now we add context of like that nightmare Max was having. He's like, oh, I haven't had it since I was a kid, but now it makes sense. So, like, he was abused. Is it because like they're like, oh, you're the savior, so we're abusing you into being like disciplined and powerful, or what? Because all we saw was like him chained up and someone touching it. So maybe it was about protecting him, not just Michael, not Michael, but which sounds effed up saying like, oh, not Michael, saying like, oh, Michael's not important, but protecting Max not only from humans, but maybe even other people that were on that spaceship, other aliens that were on that ship. So, because I'll skip to it right now, but basically Max has a burn on the back of his neck. I brought it up last episode where I was like, oh, it kind of reminded me of the lightning from when Max shocked Noah. I thought it was that, but it's like, no, like now it makes sense because they're like, oh, it's a burn. It wasn't until this episode I was like, right, I'm forgetting. One of the aliens, he was the first one to strike when they landed in Roswell, knows how to use fire. And even Max is like, I don't know, I didn't want to be I can't believe I'm the one saying this, but he's like, I think Charlie was kidnapped by an alien. Because at first I thought it was the organization that was trying to grab her last episode, but now it's like, no, whoever it was, why would they go after Maria's mom, then Cam? Because obviously, with Maria's mom, it's because of her power, so maybe they're aware of that, or maybe because these are people in close proximity, to Max and them, or maybe it's because they know what Charlie's was researching, so that could be used to wipe them out. So maybe it's self-preservation in that regard. Maybe they want to use Maria's mom because they knew about her abilities, and maybe just the situation of Cam's proximity to Max and everything, them having the relationship they have. So who knows? That's kind of where my mindset is. But obviously Isabel tried to use her powers on the sheriff, but they didn't work because it turns out Kyle's the one that got up all the yellow powder, all that flower powder that they were looking at. Michael and Liz were. Michael was like, "Where was it?" It's like Kyle got it and he put it in that perfume he gave his mom to protect her from, kind of being. Because for him, it's like, I'm not gonna let you like parade in my mom's mind and try to make her think that she's wrong about this. Because in actuality, she's right. Because it's like Max did kill Noah and everything, but the fact is we can't let her know everything. Sure, but we can't just let her think she's crazy either. It's like, for him, it's like he wants to protect his mom because it's like she's really good at what she does. So he goes to Max and it's like Max is like, thank you, because like this is our first interaction since him coming back. And Kyle's like, well, the fact of the matter is you brought back my sister, so this is us calling it even. But it's like, tell my mom the truth. He's like, you don't have to tell her everything, but just one truth to kind of get her off your back. So Max admits like, okay, I couldn't have been during the kidnapping because I had a heart transplant. He's like, I didn't want to you to really, for my personal reasons for not saying it, but I want to protect this community. I want to do good for this community. And so Kyle is kind of backing him up about everything. But what was interesting though is Max being like, okay, I'm telling her some other truths. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to prove it, but Noah was a killer. It's like there's at least 14 victims that were. She's like, what? No way. It's like, yes, like people who were vagrants, homeless, people that wouldn't be missed. Noah was behind that. And the fact of the matter is he, abused and manipulated my sister into doing stuff she wouldn't have done for 10 years. So for him, it's like, and Noah got struck by lightning. And honestly, I'm glad, so there is honesty there. Like, oh, I'm glad he's dead because I believe him to be a monster. I can't prove it. He was a monster. So, but basically saying you're a good person. You're a good, sheriff. The fact of the matter is that you do good to protecting this community. Noah's not one of those people worth, your time. So him probably returning as officer, probably less likely now. So he just kind of walks away. So I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. It's just interesting, but it was enough to kind of ease her mind about what's going on. But obviously for him, he's like, I'm still going to look into these kidnappings and stuff like that. Obviously on his own, because he knows like there's potential alien involvement and all that. So it presents some very, interesting stuff. At least this kind of pulls back, Kyle's mom, and I'm curious to see what that does, like her knowing now about Noah. Like, will that make her start looking into Noah more now? Like, because she kept looking into him as a victim, but now it's like, oh, I might be looking into him as a serial killer, because she kept thinking like Max is behind that. But like, obviously, because of everything Max had been through, like the trauma and everything, like obviously Max has deep-seated anger issues. There's a little bit of darkness in him, and he was like, we're wasting all this time. You think I'm the one behind this when we should be looking for Charlie, who got kidnapped and he was bending a spoon. And she's like, see what I'm talking about? So it does present some interesting stuff that I think we need to, keep in mind. Obviously, once again, Liz not too keen on telling Max what she's really up to. That'll probably be, a downfall. But an interesting conversation happened between Michael and Sanders, because it was like, he was like, yeah, I owe you this much for all the copper wire I've stolen over the past couple of years. So, you taking your 25% of my paycheck and everything. And he's like, kid, I didn't need the wire. You needed it for whatever. Go ahead. I didn't care. You needed it more than I did. And for him, it's like for him, he regrets, because the fact is, like, he tried to get Michael at points, but it's like, me being who I am, like, I wasn't so unsuitable. I would have, would have messed you up worse than you are, But for him, he's like, so I can't pay you back for that. But he's like, honestly, you won't even have to, like, so you don't have to pay me back. And he's like, and honestly, I can't pay you back, because I was able to spend that 1 year with Miss Nora and Miss Louise, and because of that, I can never pay you back. So, and kind of walks away. So, and a lot of interesting stuff on that front. It's going to be also hard too. Like, well, their mom is potentially alive, but his isn't. So that's just going to be kind of a more of a knife digging deeper into Michael. So obviously, a lot, like I said, a lot to kind of figure out. It's interesting because even the sheriff mentioned, the twins that were played by David Anders, like one just makes boots, the other one's crazy, kind of using that as a comparison between Isabel and Max. But I think that's going to be all interesting stuff to see kind of going forward, like Max's continued investigation into like finding out who took Charlie, obviously Isabel and him looking into her mom, obviously Liz continuing her experiments, Kyle and wherever him in this whole Steph situation ends up, and obviously like Jesse and Alex, like what Jesse, because Alex is, Jesse's most likely going to follow them to Louise, so that's probably going to end up being an issue. But I mean, I'm curious to see what she's been up to this entire time. I'm assuming it was like, I wonder, is it going to be a situation where we find out Jesse's actually the one that put Tripp down, because he did find out way back then, or was it Tripp's brother, Harlan, that ended up doing it? A lot of questions to keep in mind. Like I said, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.